Hey there, and welcome to my channel. This is Elizabeth with LA's Handcrafted Jewelry, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create this adorable mini woven pendant. Now in this tutorial, you'll learn how to weave the frame, create the bail, secure the back, and create those fun woven accents on the front. So let's get into it. Now for materials, you're going to need a ruler, flesh cutters, chain nose pliers, round nose pliers, a 10 by 14 millimeter cabochon, 5 6-inch segments of 22 gauge wire, and 28 gauge wire for weaving. Now first things first, we need to know the distance around the stone, so I'm just going to go ahead and take some masking tape and I'll pull off a little segment, and I'm going to use that to gauge the distance around the stone so that when we create the frame we have an idea of how much we need to weave. So starting at the top of the stone, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this tape around the perimeter of the stone, and then that'll kind of give me an idea of how much wire I need for the frame. Now I'm going to go ahead and tear off the segment of tape, and then I'm going to stick it to my desk, and I'm going to use this as a guide for my frame. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull out my 5 segments of 22 gauge wire, and I'm going to go ahead and pull one of those wires out from the group, and I'm going to lay it there on my guide, kind of having the center at the middle of the guide there, and that'll tell me where I need to start for the frame. I'm going to take my weaving wire and wrap it around that base wire 2 to 3 times. Now once I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and grab another base wire and place it on top, and then I'm going to take my weaving wire and I'm going to wrap it around those 2 base wires 2 times. Now once I've wrapped around 2 times, I'm going to take that weaving wire and bring it in between those 2 wires. And then I'm going to stack another base wire on top of that and continue the weave until I've incorporated all the wires. Now this is going to follow the same weave pattern as my inverted teardrop tutorial. This particular weave is called the pyramid or zigzag weave, and is accomplished by wrapping the weaving wire around 2 base wires and then moving on to the next 2 base wires until you reach the other side, and then wrapping the same pattern descending back to where you started. Now I'm just going to check it against my guide to make sure that I have woven just enough, and it should just be just on the outside of my guide. From there, I'm going to go ahead and take my woven wire and I'm going to start at the middle and bend it around the stone. You can lay it on a flat surface and then begin wrapping the frame around it. I find that best when starting out. And then from there, you can use your fingers to kind of adjust it until you get it where you like it. But just make sure that the stone fits in there nice and neat. Once you get the frame kind of settled where you want it, we're going to go ahead and make sure that those 2 woven pieces meet together, and we're going to go ahead and pull aside the remaining base wires except for the 2 center base wires. And what we're going to do is take our weaving wire and wrap it 2 times around the center 2 base wires. And once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and wrap around the 2 middle base wires there and wrap around that 1 base wire 1 time. And then we're going to wrap around both of those base wires 1 time. And then around that last base wire 1 time. And then we're going to come underneath all of those base wires to the other side, not the 2 on the outer side, but the 2 in the center, and wrap around the 1 on the outer side. And then around both of those base wires. and then come in the middle between those two and wrap around that inner base wire. Now at this point, I'm just pulling aside those two outer or middle base wires so that they're out of the way, and then I'm going to wrap around the outer base wire one time, wrap around both base wires one time, bring it in between those two base wires to wrap around the inner base wire one time, and then going underneath to wrap around the outer base wire again. And you're basically going to continue this pattern to create the bail. And from there, you're going to want to pull those apart just a little bit so that way you have a nice angle on the bail, and wrap about 1/2 inch. And once we've wrapped about 1/2 inch, I'm going to go ahead and start pulling those inward to create more of a diamond shape. So it should mirror the bottom section. So I'm going to pull those out on the outside just so that that shows me where I'm going to end my weave. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and continue weaving up that until I finish my bail. And just a little tip about weaving up this side, it can be a little bit more difficult as you're weaving, but holding it with your finger that you're not using to weave with, like my index finger here on the left, to hold the wire in place until I can add tension. And that will help me as I'm weaving my way up the bail. Now once you've completed the bail, you can bend it over backwards, either using a dowel, your fingers, or some bail making pliers, but this just works well for me, just making that bail and getting it in place. And from there, I'm going to go ahead and take my weaving wire, and I'm going to go ahead and start completing the back portion. And to do this, I'm just going to go ahead and wrap around the outer base wire. I'm going to do that 3 times. And then once I do that, I'll wrap around both base wires 2 times. Once I've wrapped around both of those 2 times, I'm going to wrap around that outer wire 3 more times. And this is what's known as the lashing weave. And this is what I'm going to use to complete my back and hold the stone in place. So this is what the pattern should look like. It should be 3 around the outer base wire, and then 2 around both, and then 3 again. And just complete this pattern until you make it till probably about 1/2 inch or so, and then you can check where you're at. Now once I've kind of gotten where I want it in the length, I'm going to go ahead and trim off, leaving a bit of weaving wire attached. And I'm going to go ahead and curve this lashing weave a little bit just to follow the perimeter of the frame. From there, I'm going to go ahead and create a loop on the inner wire, take my flush cutters and trim off the excess. And then I'm going to go ahead and create basically a swirl at the end. And then trim the other wire to have it ready to curl as well, grabbing my round nose pliers and creating those loops at the end of the wire. Now I'm going to work on the opposite side and going to go ahead and make it mirror the previous side. So I'm going to take my weaving wire and I'm going to wrap it around the outer base wire 3 times to start the new weave. Once I've wrapped around the one base wire, I'm going to wrap around both base wires and then wrap around the outer base wire 3 more times, and doing the lashing weave just like I did on the opposite side. Once I've completed the back, I'm going to go ahead and turn my focus to the front of the frame, and I'm going to take those 2 center wires and I'm going to begin twisting them to create the twisted accent over the bail. And you want to make sure that the wires are basically as far opposite as you can, just to give you the optimum twist. Once the wire's been twisted, we're going to go ahead and bend it over the top of the bail, and I'm going to twist a little bit more just so that there's something that I can tuck in underneath the bail. And just trim it off with your flesh cutters, grab your chain nose pliers, and tuck in the excess. Once I finish with the bail, I'm going to go ahead and put my stone in its spot, and I'm going to go ahead and secure the back to the frame so that way the stone is set in place. Now to secure the stone, I'm going to go ahead and take my weaving wire and direct it in between the base wires of the frame. And I'll wrap those around a couple times, and then I will wrap around the back loop a couple times just to make sure that the weaving wire is secured to the back. Once the one side has been secured, I'm going to go ahead and do the same to the other side. Once the back of the stone has been secured, I'm going to go ahead and start working on the accents. So I'm going to go ahead and take my weaving wire, and I'm going to wrap around the inner base wire 3 times, basically repeating the lashing weave that we did on the back. So 3 times around the inner wire, and then 2 times around both wires, and then 3 times around the inner wire again. And you'll just want to do this weave until you reach about 1.5 inches or so. When you cut off the excess, just be sure to leave a little bit on just so that you have extra to weave if necessary. Now once I've woven both sides, I'm going to go ahead and begin creating the looped accents. And I'll do this by pulling the weaving wire away from the bail just slightly and then curving it over forward towards the front of the pendant. And as you can see, I'm using my chain nose pliers to give me some assistance in doing that. Just be careful if you're using coated wires, you don't want to mar the wire. Now that I've created the first loop, I'm going to go ahead and start the second loop, using my fingers to create another loop in the weave. And again, using my chain nose pliers to give some assistance. And we'll just continue doing that until we can swoop it down to the outside of the frame. Once we've done it to the first side, we're going to do it to the opposite side and mirror it by pulling it away just slightly from the bail and swooping it over towards the front of the pendant like before. And again, at this point, we're going to go ahead and create another loop, swooping it over just like the previous. Now once you've completed the loops, we're going to go ahead and finish it off by trimming off the excess base wires, and probably leaving about 1/4 of an inch and then about 1/2 inch on the bottom. This bottom one doesn't need trimmed, but we'll trim the top one here. And we're going to grab our round nose pliers and we're going to go ahead and create some loops at the end of those wires. The top one we're going to go ahead and wrap upward, while the bottom wire we're going to go ahead and swoop downward. Now we're just going to go ahead and repeat that on the opposite side. Once we've finished our loops, we're going to go ahead and secure it to the frame by using the excess weaving wire at the end and feeding it through the side of the frame and through the loops, so that way we can secure the loops to the side of the frame. Now if you're having a hard time getting the weaving wire in between the frame, you can use something like an awl, A-W-L, awl, to kind of help you get a space in between those. If you are still having difficulty, you can also use a thinner gauge wire. In this case, this is 28 gauge wire, so using 30 gauge wire could also be of great help if you're having a hard time getting in between those base wires. Once you've attached them to the frame, at this point you can go ahead and do the pull and twist method, or you can go ahead and trim off the excess with your flush cutters. And there you have it, a mini woven pendant from start to finish. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you don't miss out on the latest videos. And be sure to hit that like button if you're enjoying these tutorials so far. And thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope that you guys all have such a wonderful day.